Today, I'm making 4 different apple pie moonshine recipes that the international home distilling community has labelled the very best. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, this is Still It, and these, well, it's a whole lot of apple pie moonshine. In fact, so much that it's kind of hard to talk past it. Let me get it out of the way. But here's the thing, guys. I consulted Uncle Google. I scoured through home distilling forums all over the place. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos on the topic, and probably most importantly, I asked you guys to submit your very best apple pie moonshine recipes. I took all of those recipes, assessed them all, and got a little bit geeky with, well, there were spreadsheets and stuff like that as well. And it turns out that there are basically 3 different apple pie recipes that you guys, the home distilling community, recommends. There's the fresh, uncooked version, a kind of par-cooked, infused version, and then a straight-up cooked apple version. So, I took all of these recipes, I got 36 of them in the end, and scoured through them for anything that was interesting in terms of a different ingredient or a different technique. Things that I thought were worthy made it into one of these 3 recipes. But the main goal of going through all of those recipes was to condense them down into those 3 different categories. Oh, and by the way, I made my own kind of kiwi spin on apple pie moonshine. We'll get to that at the end. But first, let's get stuck in with the first recipe, shall we? This is the uncooked version. And to start, you're going to need a 2 to 3 litre jar. That and freedom units. Keep an eye out for these. They'll be popping up all through the video. Now you're going to slice up 3 apples and put them into that jar. I am using Braeburns, and to be honest, mine are kind of small, so I actually used 5. Next, 1 cinnamon stick. This is going to macerate for a while though, guys, so I actually erred on the smaller side rather than the larger side. 1/2 of a nutmeg thingy, whatever they are, cracked. 2 peppercorns, and around about 45 grams of American white oak. 1 litre of white corn whiskey at 60% ABV, aka our moonshine, and 300 mils of apple juice concentrate. Pop the lid on and let it macerate for 3 to 7 days. If you really want to know what I did, it was 5 days. At which point you want to strain all of the chunky stuff out, pop it back into the same jar, fish the piece of oak out and pop that back in there, and add in 300 mils of an ester forward rum. So, how does the raw version taste? By far the most whiskey-like of anything here on the table, which for me is a good thing. It is juicy and slightly tart. It has that raw apple mouth-watering kind of characteristic to it that the others don't have as much of. And the spices in here are much more reminiscent of the kind of spices that you would get out of some barrel treatments. It does not drink or taste like a liqueur. It drinks and tastes much more like a whiskey. I guess you'd call it like a sweet flavored whiskey, not a liqueur. Regular viewers of the channel will probably remember that I made an apple brandy not long ago, and everyone in the comment section was telling me that I should have used apple concentrate. And I didn't, because we can't get it here in New Zealand. I was wrong. Restaurant supply stores are the answer, and I found 2 of them that promised me on their website that they carried apple juice concentrate. Problem is, when I turned up to get them, both of them said, "Oh yeah, I know that stuff. No one ever bought it, so we don't carry it anymore." So, anytime in this video that you see me using apple juice concentrate, it's just apple juice that's been boiled for long enough to reduce it down to about 1/3 of its original size. Anyway, should we move on to the next recipe? But, actually, first, I need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. Thank you so much, Patreons, for being absolutely awesome people that support me on a regular basis. I thank you for that so much. And by the way, team, there will be a spreadsheet over on the Patreon platform that has each of these 4 recipes spelled out for you, and you can alter the volume you want to make, and it'll spat out all the ingredients for you. Anyway, back to the recipe, eh? Next up is the semi-cooked version, and we are going to basically use heat to extract and macerate the flavors from the cooking spice. Add 500 ml of apple juice concentrate to a pot over medium heat to get it warming up. And while that's happening, we can get our spices together, which are half a nutmeg, slightly crushed, 2 cloves, 3 cinnamon sticks, 2 slices of bruised ginger, half a vanilla pod, and 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. You're going to want to scrape just the seeds out of the vanilla pod and add those in with all of the other stuff into the concentrate. Let it come up to a simmer, turn the heat off, put it aside, and let it naturally cool and macerate for at least an hour. I went for 2 hours actually, not because I wanted to, because I got distracted with the kids. At that point, you can strain it into a 2-litre jar again and add 1.2 litres of 60% moonshine or white corn whiskey, whatever you want to call it, at 60% ABV, and 300 ml of apple port. You could also use apple brandy if you wanted to. How does the par-cooked version taste? Heating the spices, even though we didn't cook the bejesus out of them in this version, totally starts to change them. They go from being like plants, like bits of plant stuff, into being cooking spices, which I know is a really dumb thing to say, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. The spice profile is more wholesome. It's more comfort food. It is more baked spice, funnily enough, right? We also don't have any fresh apple in this, which I know is weird, but a bunch of the Apple Pie Moonshines didn't have any. So the apple profile has moved away from being juicy and mouth-watering back to being kind of more, I guess, candy-like. But there is actually still a little bit of a tartness that does make it feel fruity from the apple concentrate. It's kind of surprising to me that that comes across like that. It's not just straight candy. Just to let you know, team, the recipes I'm showing you today lean more towards the higher proof, boozier, less sweet side of things compared to most of the recipes that I found while doing the research for this video. The reason I'm doing that is it matches my preferences. This is more along the lines of what I like to drink, and these are the recipes I settled on with testing. I'm comfortable basically leaving options out of this video because it is so insanely easy to just add, you know, more apple juice or more sugar or less sugar or more booze. It's just like a cooking show with a recipe, right? Instead of seasoning to taste, it's booze and sugar to taste. Next up, the cooked version. We're going to take things a little bit further with the cooked spice flavors this time. So half a litre of concentrate and half a litre of apple juice go into the pot, followed by 4 diced apples. No, that's not quite a dice. I know that. In any case, you're going to cook it for around about 25 minutes before adding in your spices, which are half a nutmeg slightly crushed, again, 3 cinnamon sticks, again, but this time we're using 6 allspice berries, and of course, 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. Let that cook for another 25 minutes before once again letting it naturally cool and macerate by itself. I actually did do an hour this time, before straining it and adding it into a 2-litre jar along with 1.2 litres of corn moonshine or whiskey, whatever you want to call the stuff. This one was a little bit harder for me to balance in terms of sugar to alcohol profiliness. So it is actually a little bit short of 2 litres, and that is so you can adjust it to your taste with either more booze, more apple juice, or sugar syrup. So how does the cooked version come across? It's almost a perfect ramp in terms of spice profile between these three. It is, oh, this fly is annoying me. It is everything that this has become in juxtaposition to the first one, but even more so. So it's even more baked goods. It's even more like that wholesome Nan's house kind of random memories for me. I don't quite know how to sum it up, but it's just more like a pie and less like a maceration. I'm not saying that's a good thing compared to these two, because I would actually prefer to drink this, and we'll get to more on that in the end. But if you want it to straight up taste like apple pie, I think this might be the go. You have probably noticed throughout this video that I've been using 60% ABV corn moonshine or white corn whiskey through the entire video. And that is not just because that's what I had laying around. The reason I chose 60% ABV is because if you want to reach a relatively decent ABV as a final product, 60% will let you do that. But it is also very obtainable and doable for any home distiller, regardless of the equipment that you have. Now, if you want to follow along with 40% ABV from the shop, by all means, you can certainly do this. Just be aware your ABV of the finished product is going to be lower. Growing up here in New Zealand, I don't know if I ever actually ate apple pie. I don't think I did. But what I did have a buttload of as a kid was apple crumble. Now, apple crumble doesn't have a pie crust. It is basically just spiced, stewed apples with a oat crumble on top, and it is absolutely freaking delicious. That last recipe, the cooked moonshine, almost gave me nostalgic flashbacks of my nan's apple crumble, but not quite. So I've set it as my own personal quest for this video to see if I could come up with a apple crumble moonshine recipe. Here we go. So you're going to want to start off by dry roasting half a cup of oats in a pan over medium heat. Keep them moving so they don't burn, and keep cooking them until around about the 2-minute mark, where they should be going wonderfully fragrant and kind of nutty. Now you want to add in a bit of butter and 2 tablespoons of golden syrup. Keep cooking them for about 2 minutes. Make sure you're moving everything a lot. Don't stop stirring. Don't let that sugar burn. Don't let the oats burn. That would be bad news. After 2 minutes, take it off the heat and add in another big old dollop of butter. As long as all that butter melts, you're good. If it doesn't, stick it back on the heat for a little bit to make sure it melts well. Let it cool down to something like 40 degrees Celsius, at which point you're going to throw it into a 1 litre container along with 700 mils of our 60% ABV corn moonshine. Close the container and we're going to move on to our apples. I don't know why, in all the recipes I've seen, no one seems to mention what kind of apples to use. And I don't know if that's just because it's given that you use a certain kind. Maybe I'm done. Inform me down below. But for me, apple crumble has to be made from Granny Smith apples. So we're using Granny Smiths here, okay, with a little bit of Braeburn to add in a little bit of flavor diversity. So 1 litre of corn moonshine goes into a jar along with 4 diced up Granny Smith apples and 1 Braeburn. Close the lid on both of these concoctions and let them macerate for 3 to 7 days again. For me, this was actually only 3 days. I was running out of time a little bit here. But to strain the fat-washed moonshine, you're going to want to put that into the freezer overnight to set the butter and then strain it through a coffee filter. Add 650 mils of the fat-washed moonshine into the jar along with 750 mils of the apple macerated moonshine. Now we can get on to the cooked part of this recipe. Start with 500 mils of concentrate and add another litre of apple juice into a pot. Get it simmering away, and we're going to add in 4 diced up Granny Smiths and 1 diced up Braeburn. We're going to let this cook for 45 minutes or until they're almost starting to fall apart, and then we're going to put our spices in. 3 cinnamon sticks, 3 quarts of a nutmeg cracked, 1.5 vanilla pod split that I actually forgot to record for some reason, but it's in there, just trust, and 1/8 a teaspoon of mixed spice. This time the sweeteners are 1/2 a cup of brown sugar and 1/2 a cup of golden syrup. Cook it for another 20 minutes before removing it from the heat, letting it cool for at least an hour, straining it, and adding 550 mils of the stuff into our booze. How does the apple crumble moonshine taste? Now, the first thing, the elephant in the room to get out of the way, is because I cooked it so long, the apples just literally broke down. Now, I could have cooked the apples for a little bit shorter amount of time, but the Granny Smiths tends to break up a lot quicker than the others, and you get that kind of powdery mouthfeel when you bake Granny Smith apples. And this gives that to you. I could also filter it again. I have yet to decide what I'm going to do about that. It is boozier than anything else on the table by a small amount, but it has also actually got more sugar in it than anything else on the table. But because there's so much Granny Smith in there, it's actually the tartest on the table as well, which is really quite interesting. The apple comes through a lot, and we have a very interesting juxtaposition of fresh apple and stewed apple, both of which are beautifully Granny Smith. Switching it up to golden syrup does definitely change the flavor profile, and it definitely nudges it closer to old school New Zealand baking than does using just the brown sugar by itself. I like that in terms of what I'm going for here. That toasted oat thing is definitely there, and once again, it really does add to the nostalgia of apple crumble for me. So I'm actually kind of proud of that. So we've got to the point in the video where you're expecting me to tell you which I prefer, and honestly, I don't know if I can do that. These are all insanely tasty, and it's kind of crazy to me that I have not made apple pie moonshine already. This is silly. This stuff is so freaking good. I get it. I finally understand it. Yes, you were all right. So with that being said, I don't think I can say which is best, but I can tell you what I like. So in terms of the one that I think I'm going to be reaching for the most, the one that I think that I'm going to drink dry first, it's going to be this guy here, which is ironic because it's the only one on the table that I think is going to improve with age, and I'm probably going to drink it first. But if we're here to talk about nostalgia, if we're here to talk about what kind of just gives me that weird dopamine hit from being familiar and bringing back memories, all of this. I will drink any of these as a kind of like an after dinner aperitif kind of thing. Apple crumble is one of those things that I used to have at every family party, just about. Yeah, and I almost never have it anymore. There's good memories in there. It's not Nan's apple crumble, but it's close. So, which of these 4 recipes is closest to your favorite apple pie moonshine? How do you like your apple pie moonshine? Stick it in the comment section down below. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button because that helps me out a bunch. Ring the notification bell if you want to see more things like this popping up in your YouTube feed. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.